Hello again and welcome. On the last episode, I spoke with instructional designers Paloma, Amie, and Lori about what the forgetting curve is. Moving on, this episode I will be continuing my conversation with them on the forgetting curve, discussing ways to combat it. So this is definitely all coming down kind of into the design aspect of the learning materials that's being presented to the learners. So I mean, if you have general content that's just a rough outline of everything that you're kind of broadcasting to everyone, then obviously there's going to be a lot of content that's missed and not digested properly. Yes.
Right, and that's why it's so important to make sure that the information is revisited after the lesson, so that over time it becomes more concrete in our brains.
And each time that what's in it for me. So understanding the learner, understanding like what their needs as a learner is, as well as the repetition, is going to help with that, reducing that 65% or helping to reinforce, what it was in that 65% that was missed that now that we got to pick back up in the next learning session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And I think, Lori was alluding to the learning method of spaced learning.
Exactly.
Which I think is really an important method for instructional designers to consider when they're developing a curriculum, but if it's a very narrow time duration or seat time for the training, then you might start to think about, okay, what can we do after the training event to make sure that we're giving them opportunities to repeat the learning content. So just, thinking beyond that training event, and then really focusing on how you can embed spaced learning as part of the overall curriculum, I think will also help combat that forgetting curve.
So if we have, let's say, a training event, right, and then you want them to be able to retain that information. So is that maintenance that you're talking about? Is that the follow-up that comes after the learning event?
Absolutely. And that's where spaced repetition is awesome. It's where we repeat short lessons over time rather than repeating the same information for a short time frame.
Yeah, it's also helpful to understand what the opposite of spaced learning is, and that is cramming information into a training event or a learning event and just really expecting everyone to remember everything. And when we're cramming the information, it's going to be very random what sticks and what people actually end up taking away. And what they end up taking away, might not be the core takeaway that you were intending, but because there wasn't as much thought put into the design or consideration of methods like spaced learning, then I think you end up with a pretty ineffective training module.
Well, thank you all for sharing your insights on combating the forgetting curve, especially on the topic of spaced learning. In our next episode, we'll be discussing ways to manage the retention of learned materials and the impact of a learning culture in the workplace. Until next time.